Midnight in a forest, no moon, no stars through the canopy, darkness so complete you can't see your hand in front of your face, and somewhere in that void an owl is hunting, not hunting despite the darkness, hunting because of it. Right now, across every continent except Antarctica, owls are doing something that should be impossible. They're catching prey they cannot see in conditions where vision fails completely. A mouse moves beneath snow, a vole shifts under leaves, and from 30 feet above in total silence, the owl hears exactly where it is. Not just direction, but distance, depth, the precise geometry of empty space between predator and prey. We thought darkness was the absence of information. We were wrong. Because what if seeing was never really about light? What if vision was always just one way to map the world, and some animals found a better way? Tonight, we're following the lineage that dismantled the eye and rebuilt perception from sound and shadow. We'll trace how feathers learned to silence flight, how ears learned to drink darkness, how one group of birds turned the night into a hunting ground no other predator could access. By the end, you might never think about your senses the same way again, because if owls can see with sound, then perhaps perception isn't what we thought. Perhaps the world isn't what we see, it's what we sense. And in total darkness, the owl perceives more than we ever will in daylight. So let's begin where all hunters begin, with the question of how to find what hides. This is Omni, stories about life, matter, and the mystery in between. Like the video, drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe if you believe curiosity should never end. Picture a barn owl perched on a fence post at the edge of a field. It's 2 hours past sunset. The moon hasn't risen yet. The only light comes from stars filtered through thin clouds, barely enough to cast shadows, certainly not enough for you to see anything moving in the grass below. But the owl isn't looking. Its head is tilted, one ear pointed slightly downward, perfectly still except for the slow swivel of its disc-shaped face. 30 feet below, hidden beneath a layer of dead grass and snow, a vole is moving, not quickly, just a few steps, a pause, another step. The vole weighs less than 2 ounces. Its footfalls are nearly silent, softer than a whisper, quieter than your breath. The owl hears it anyway. Not just that something is moving. The owl knows exactly where. It's triangulating, measuring the microsecond difference in when sound reaches its left ear versus its right, calculating vertical angle from the difference in volume between its asymmetrical ear openings. In its brain, a 3-dimensional map is forming, a sound shadow of the space below, precise enough to guide talons to a target the owl has never seen. The owl leans forward, lifts off, wings spread wide, 5 feet across, beating downward in complete silence. No whoosh of air, no rustle of feathers. The flight is ghosted, muted, erased from the acoustic landscape, and the vole, hidden under snow in total darkness, has no warning. The owl's talons punch through the white surface, closing around the small body with mechanical precision. The hunt is over in 2 seconds. The vole never heard death coming. This is not stealth for stealth's sake. The silence isn't about sneaking, it's about listening. Because here's what makes this extraordinary. Most predators go silent to avoid being detected. The owl goes silent so it can hear. Every whoosh of wing, every rustle of feather, every breath of turbulent air would mask the tiny sounds it's hunting. So evolution solved a problem most birds never faced. It made flight itself disappear from the soundscape, turning one of the noisiest activities in nature into something quieter than falling snow. We've known owls hunt at night for millennia, but what we're discovering now goes deeper than nocturnal behaviour. This isn't just an animal that adapted to darkness. This is an animal that rebuilt perception itself, that inverted the hierarchy of the senses, that turned the absence of light into an advantage no other bird possesses. Across more than 250 species, from Arctic tundra to tropical rainforest, owls have conquered the night in ways that still baffle engineers trying to replicate their abilities. Their hearing is so precise that in laboratory conditions, some species can catch prey in total darkness with accuracy rates above 90%. They're not guessing, they're not lucky, they're perceiving a world we can't access, mapping space through sound with a resolution that rivals vision. But this didn't happen overnight. The owl's hunting system, the silent flight, the asymmetrical ears, the facial disc that funnels sound like a satellite dish, is the product of tens of millions of years of evolution, layer upon layer of refinement, each adaptation solving a problem the previous generation couldn't. And it all started with a simple question. What if you couldn't see your prey? Tonight we're going to trace that evolutionary journey from the first owls that hunted at dusk to the modern species that thrive in total blackness. We'll explore the anatomy of silence, the geometry of sound, and the neuroscience of how a brain builds a three-dimensional map from differences measured in microseconds. We'll discover that what we call night vision has almost nothing to do with eyes, because seeing was never really about light, it was about information. And the owl found information where we thought there was none, in the rustling of leaves, in the crunch of snow, in the faint pressure waves that ripple through air when something small and alive tries to stay hidden. Let's begin where the owl's story begins, not in darkness, but in the fading light of dusk, 60 million years ago, when one lineage of birds made a choice that would change predation forever. Maybe vision was always optional, we just never questioned it. Let's start 60 million years ago, in the forest that grew back after the asteroid. The dinosaurs were gone, the sky was open, and birds were experimenting with every possible way to make a living in a world that had just been reset. Most raptors, the hawks, the eagles, the falcons, chose daylight. They refined their eyes, packed their retinas with photoreceptors, built visual systems so acute they could spot a rabbit from a mile away. Vision became their primary tool and it worked brilliantly. But daylight is crowded. Competition is fierce. Every predator is hunting the same prey during the same hours. Some birds looked at the night and saw opportunity. The early owls, ancestors of the species we know today, weren't particularly special at first. They were part of a broader radiation of nocturnal and crepuscular raptors, birds hunting at dawn and dusk when light levels drop and most daytime predators retire. According to phylogenetic research published in 2024 by Prom and colleagues at Yale, the owl lineage split from other birds of prey somewhere in the Paleocene, roughly 60 to 65 million years ago. They weren't born as night hunters. They became night hunters, slowly, through incremental changes that made dim light less of a barrier. The first adaptation was obvious: bigger eyes. If you want to see in low light, you need to capture more photons. The solution is surface area. Owls didn't just enlarge their eyes, they rebuilt them. A barn owl's eyes are enormous relative to its skull, so large they can't rotate in their sockets. They're tubular, not spherical, extending deep into the skull to maximize the distance between lens and retina. This gives them incredible light-gathering power. An owl's eye can capture over 100 times more light than a human eye of the same size, but there's a trade-off. Large eyes mean less space for other things. The owl's brain is compressed, its sense of smell is almost non-existent, and those eyes, locked in place, mean the owl has to move its entire head to look around, which is why owls can rotate their heads up to 270 degrees, an adaptation made necessary by the immobility of their vision. Still, even with eyes this powerful, there's a limit. At a certain point, there just aren't enough photons. On a moonless night under forest canopy, even the best eyes in the world can't see a mouse moving through leaf litter. The information simply isn't there. So the owl did something radical. It stopped relying on eyes, or more accurately, it built a second perceptual system, one that could work when vision failed. And that system runs on sound. Here's where the story gets strange. Because sound, as a hunting tool, has a problem that vision doesn't. Light travels in straight lines. You see what's in front of you, and the direction is obvious. But sound scatters. It bounces off surfaces, bends around obstacles, reflects and refracts. A single rustle in, the leaves reaches your ears from multiple directions at once, how do you know where it actually came from? The owl solved this with asymmetry. If you look at an owl's skull, really look at it stripped of feathers, you'll notice something unsettling. The ear openings aren't level. On most owl species, one ear is higher than the other. On some, like the boreal owl and the long-eared owl, the asymmetry is extreme. The left ear points upward, the right ear points downward, and they're offset vertically by a significant fraction of the skull's height. This isn't a mutation, it's not an accident. It's an evolutionary innovation that turns the owl's head into a biological trigonometry machine. Here's how it works. Sound from directly in front of the owl reaches both ears at the same time with the same intensity, perfect symmetry. But sound from above reaches the upward pointing ear sooner and louder. Sound from below hits the downward pointing ear first. The owl's brain measures these microsecond differences in arrival time and the tiny differences in volume, and from that information alone, it calculates both horizontal and vertical position. Research by Konishi in the 1970s and more recently by Carr and colleagues at the University of Maryland in 2023 has mapped the neural circuits responsible for this. In the owl's auditory brainstem, there are specialized neurons that fire only when sounds arrive at both ears with a specific time delay. One neuron fires for sounds 10 microseconds apart, another fires for 20 microseconds, another for 30. The brain has a map, a spatial grid encoded in timing, and when a sound arrives, the pattern of neurons that light up tells the owl exactly where in space that sound originated. This is called binaural sound localization, and while many animals do it to some extent, owls have refined it to a precision that rivals the best technology humans have built. A barn owl can locate a sound source to within 1 degree of accuracy in both horizontal and vertical planes. That's the difference between hitting a target and missing it by an inch at 30 feet. But there's still a problem. All of this only works if the owl can hear the prey in the first place. And flight is loud. Think about what happens when a bird flies. Wings beat downward, pushing air, creating vortices at the trailing edge of each feather. Turbulent air rushes over the body. Feathers vibrate and rustle against each other. The faster the flight, the louder the noise. For most birds, this doesn't matter. They're flying to travel, to escape, to migrate. The sound is irrelevant. But for an owl hunting by sound, every whoosh of its own wings is a wall of noise obscuring the very signals it needs to detect. It's like trying to hear a whisper while standing next to a running engine. So evolution muted the engine. The owl's wing feathers have 3 key modifications, each one contributing to silence. First, the leading edge of the primary feathers, the long, feathers at the wingtip, has a serrated comb, a fringe of tiny barbs that breaks up the airflow. Normally, when air hits the leading edge of a wing, it creates a clean, sharp vortex that generates noise. The comb disrupts that, turning one loud vortex into many smaller, quieter ones. Second, the trailing edge of the wing feathers is soft and fringed, not stiff and clean like most birds. This trailing fringe dampens the turbulence that forms as air leaves the wing, smoothing the flow and reducing the sound of air shearing away. Third, the surface of owl feathers has a velvety texture, a fine layer of downy filaments that covers the flight feathers. This acts like acoustic insulation, absorbing the high-frequency sounds that feathers normally make when they slide against each other. According to aerodynamic studies by Jaworski and Peake at Cambridge in 2020, and more recent work by Clan and colleagues in 2024 at RWTH Aachen University, these 3 adaptations together reduce the noise of owl flight by over 18 decibels compared to similarly sized birds. That's not just quieter, it's the difference between clearly audible and effectively silent to prey animals whose hearing is tuned to detect predators. Engineers are now trying to replicate this. Wind turbines, airplane wings, drone rotors, all of them generate noise from the same aerodynamic turbulence that owl feathers suppress. If we could copy the owl's solution, we could make human flight quieter, more efficient, less disruptive. But even with advanced materials and computational modelling, we haven't matched what evolution built from keratin and air. The owl didn't just get quiet, it got quiet enough to hear. And what it hears when it's perched above a snow-covered field in total darkness is a soundscape we can barely imagine. Every rustle of grass, every crunch of a footstep, every faint scratch of claws on bark. The world is not silent. It's full of information, encoded in pressure waves, waiting to be read. But hearing the sound is only half the problem. The owl still needs to amplify it, focus it, and deliver it to those asymmetrical ears with maximum clarity. That's where the face comes in. Look at an owl's face, and you're looking at an instrument. Not metaphorically, literally. The flat disc-shaped face of a barn owl, a great grey owl, a northern saw wet owl. It's not just aesthetics. It's not just a pattern to scare prey or attract mates. That face is a parabolic reflector, a biological satellite dish designed to gather sound and funnel it toward the ears with minimal loss. The facial disc is made of specialized feathers called rough feathers, short, dense, arranged in concentric circles radiating out from the eyes. Unlike normal feathers, these don't provide insulation or waterproofing. They're acoustic structures, stiff enough to hold shape, angled precisely to catch sound waves from in front of the owl and reflect them inward toward the ear openings hidden beneath the feathers at the edge of the disc. When a mouse rustles in the leaves below, sound radiates outward in all directions. Most of it dissipates into the environment, absorbed by trees and air and ground. But the sound waves that happen to strike the owl's facial disc don't dissipate. They bounce off those angled feathers and concentrate at the ear openings, amplifying the signal by up to 10 decibels, according to research published by Hausman and colleagues in 2009 and refined in later work through 2024. 10 decibels doesn't sound like much, but in acoustic terms it's the difference between hearing something faintly and hearing it clearly enough to locate. It's the difference between detecting prey and catching prey, and the owl can adjust it. The muscles around the facial disc allow the owl to subtly change the shape and angle of the disc, tuning it like you'd adjust a radio antenna. Tighten the disc to focus on sounds directly ahead. Relax it slightly to widen the reception area. The owl is actively shaping its own hearing in real time, optimizing for whatever acoustic environment it's hunting in. But even with all this, the silent flight, the asymmetrical ears, the facial disc, there's still the question of what happens next. The sound reaches the ears, the brain calculates position, and then what? The owl has to move. It has to translate an acoustic map into physical action, launching its body through three-dimensional space toward a target it cannot see, adjusting its trajectory mid-flight, extending its talons at precisely the right moment to intercept something small, fast, and hidden. This is where neuroscience meets acrobatics. Inside the owl's brain, in a region called the auditory midbrain, there's a structure that doesn't exist in most other birds, a topographic map of auditory space. Discovered by Knudsen and Konishi in the 1970s and expanded on in recent neuroimaging studies through 2024, this map is a literal representation of the world around the owl, organised not by what it looks like, but by where sounds are coming from. Imagine a grid. Each point on the grid corresponds to a specific location in space. 10 degrees left, 5 degrees up, 15 degrees right, 3 degrees down. And in the owl's brain, each point on that grid is represented by a cluster of neurons. When sound arrives from a particular direction, the corresponding cluster fires. The more precisely the owl can locate the sound, the sharper the neural response. But here's what makes this remarkable. This auditory map overlays perfectly with the visual map in the owl's optic tectum, the brain region responsible for visual targeting. The two sensory systems share the same spatial framework. A sound coming from 15 degrees left activates the same spatial location neurons as a visual target at 15 degrees left. This means the owl doesn't have to translate between sensory modalities. It doesn't have to think, I heard something to the left, so I should look left. The brain has already unified sound and space into a single map. When the auditory neurons fire, the motor system responds instantly, as if the owl had seen the target with its eyes. Experiments by Knudsen in the 1980s demonstrated this in a disturbing but elegant way. Researchers fitted young barn owls with prisms that shifted their visual field. Everything the owl saw appeared displaced by a fixed angle. At first, the owls couldn't hunt. Their visual map and auditory map no longer aligned. But within weeks, the brain recalibrated. The auditory map shifted to match the distorted visual input. When the prisms were removed, the owls had to recalibrate again. The system is plastic, adaptive, it learns. And this plasticity is strongest in young owls during a critical developmental window when the brain is integrating sensory experience and building its model of space. By adulthood, the map is set, but the precision is extraordinary. A barn owl in a laboratory, hunting in total darkness, can strike a moving target with over 90% accuracy. Let me restate that. No light, no visual input whatsoever, just sound. And the owl doesn't just hit the general area, it hits the target, often grabbing it cleanly with its talons. This isn't luck, it's computation. The brain is solving a ballistic problem in real time, calculating the trajectory needed to intercept a moving target based on acoustic input alone, adjusting for wind, for the owl's own momentum, for the three-dimensional geometry of the strike. And it happens fast. From the moment the owl hears a rustle to the moment its talons close around prey, the entire sequence takes less than 2 seconds. Detection, localization, launch, flight, strike. All of it guided by sound. But the system has limits. It's not magic. And understanding the limits tells us as much about the owl's perception as understanding the capabilities. First, the owl needs sound. If the prey is perfectly still, the owl can't locate it. A mouse that freezes in place becomes invisible, not to the eyes, but to the ears. Many prey species have learned this. They move in bursts, freezing between movements, forcing the owl to wait for the next acoustic cue. Second, the system works best at certain distances. Too close, and the time delays between ears become too small for the brain to measure accurately. Too far and the sound attenuates, becomes too faint to localize reliably. The optimal hunting range for most owls is between 10 and 50 feet, close enough for strong signals, far enough for meaningful time differences. Third, sound localization degrades in cluttered acoustic environments. A forest full of trees creates echoes, reflections, reverberations. A field in high wind generates constant noise that masks faint rustles. Owls hunt best in conditions where the acoustic environment is relatively clean. Still nights, open spaces beneath canopy, snow-covered ground that muffles background noise. But perhaps the most interesting limit is spectral. Owls don't hear all frequencies equally well. Their hearing is tuned, optimized for the specific sounds their prey makes. Research measuring the auditory sensitivity of various owl species shows a consistent pattern. Peak sensitivity occurs between 3000 and 8000 Hz, exactly the frequency range of mouse vocalizations. The rustle of small mammals moving through grass, the crunch of tiny feet on leaves. Below that range, sensitivity drops off. Above it, same thing. This isn't coincidence. The owl's cochlea, the spiral structure in the inner ear that converts sound waves into neural signals, has evolved a specific distribution of hair cells tuned to these frequencies. The brain receives more information about the sounds that matter, prey sounds, and filters out the frequencies that don't. It's the auditory equivalent of visual specialization. A hawk's eye has a fovea packed with receptors for sharp daylight vision. The owl's ear has a frequency distribution optimized for darkness. And this brings us to a question we haven't asked yet. If owls are so good at hunting by sound, why do they have such large eyes at all? Why not abandon vision entirely and commit fully to acoustic hunting the way bats did? The answer reveals something fundamental about sensory evolution. You don't replace one sense with another. You layer them, you integrate them, you use whichever sense provides the best information in any given moment. Vision and hearing don't compete in the owl's brain, they cooperate. On a night with even a sliver of moon, enough light to cast faint shadows, an owl uses both systems simultaneously. The eyes scan for movement, for the silhouette of a mouse crossing open ground. The ears listen for rustling, for acoustic cues that reveal what's hidden. And when both senses agree, when the visual system says something moved there, and the auditory system says, I hear something there, the confidence spikes, the owl strikes. But when light fails completely, the auditory system takes over, running alone, guiding the hunt without visual confirmation. The owl doesn't need to see to know, the sound is enough. This dual-mode operation gives owls flexibility that pure specialists don't have. A bat, for instance, has committed entirely to echolocation. Its eyes are tiny, nearly useless. It perceives the world as a soundscape, bouncing ultrasonic clicks off surfaces and listening for echoes. This works brilliantly for catching insects in midair, but it's energetically expensive. Producing those clicks burns calories, and it doesn't work well for prey on the ground, where echoes get lost in clutter. The owl took a different path. It kept vision for when vision works. It built acoustic hunting for when vision fails, and it integrated both into a unified spatial model that lets it switch seamlessly between modes depending on conditions. Evolutionary biologists call this adaptive flexibility, and it's a signature of the owl lineage, not hyperspecialization but multimodal competence, the ability to thrive in a range of conditions that would force a pure specialist to retreat. And this flexibility shows up in the diversity of owl species themselves. There are over 250 species of owls spread across every continent except Antarctica, and they don't all hunt the same way. Some, like the barn owl and the great grey owl, are acoustic specialists, hunting almost entirely by sound, thriving in open habitats where vision is limited. Others, like the snowy owl and the great horned owl, rely more heavily on vision, hunting during twilight hours when there's still enough light to see clearly. The elf owl, smallest of all owls, hunts insects in desert scrublands, snatching them from the air or off branches, a visual task requiring precision and speed. The Blakiston's fish owl, largest of the owls, wades into rivers at night and grabs fish with its talons, a tactile and acoustic task where vision is nearly useless underwater. Each species has tuned its sensory system to its ecological niche, but the underlying architecture, the silent flight, the facial disc, the asymmetrical ears, the integrated spatial map, is shared. It's the ancestral toolkit, modified and refined, but fundamentally the same solution to the same problem: how to hunt when you can't see. And here's the part that still surprises researchers. The owl's system isn't just effective, it's efficient. Energy is the currency of survival. Every calorie an animal spends on hunting has to be recouped from prey, or the animal starves. Visual hunters spend energy maintaining high-resolution eyes, processing massive amounts of visual data, scanning constantly for movement. Acoustic hunters spend energy producing and processing sound, like bats do with echolocation. The owl's system is passive. It doesn't generate sound, it listens. The prey generates the sound, and the owl just has to be quiet enough to hear it. The only energetic cost is the neural processing, which is minimal compared to active echolocation or high-speed visual pursuit. This efficiency shows up in the owl's hunting success rate. Studies of barn owls in the wild, tracked with GPS and video over multiple seasons, show strike success rates between 70% and 85% depending on conditions. That's remarkably high. A hawk hunting visually in daylight succeeds around 10% to 30% of the time. The owl, hunting in darkness by sound alone, succeeds 2 to 3 times more often. Part of this is surprise. The prey doesn't hear the owl coming, but part of it is precision. The owl's acoustic targeting is accurate enough that it doesn't waste strikes on ambiguous targets. It waits for clear signals, locks onto location, and commits only when the information is reliable. This patience, this selectivity, is built into the system. The owl's brain doesn't just process sound, it filters it, weighs it, decides whether the signal is strong enough to act on, and when it decides yes, the motor system executes with a speed and precision that looks effortless. But the most remarkable thing about the owl's hunting system isn't the hardware, the feathers, the ears, the neural circuits, it's the software. The algorithms running in the brain that turn ambiguous acoustic data into confident action. Because sound, as a sensory input, is messy, it's indirect. You're not sensing the prey itself, you're sensing the disturbance the prey creates in the medium, air. The sound has to travel through space, bending around obstacles, reflecting off surfaces, arriving at your ears already degraded and distorted. And yet the owl's brain extracts location from this messy signal with sub-degree accuracy. How? The answer lies in Bayesian inference, though the owl's brain doesn't know that's what it's called. Essentially, the brain is making predictions. It has a prior model, a probabilistic map of where prey is likely to be based on habitat, previous experience, and ecological knowledge encoded in the genes. When a sound arrives, the brain updates that model, adjusting the probability distribution to favour the location indicated by the acoustic cues. If the sound is loud and clear, the update is strong, the brain becomes confident. If the sound is faint or ambiguous, the update is weak. The brain remains uncertain, waits for more information. This is optimal inference. It's how you extract maximum information from noisy data. And the owl's brain is doing it automatically, in real time, without conscious thought. Neuroscientists studying decision-making in barn owls have found that the neural activity patterns during hunting closely match the predictions of optimal Bayesian models. The brain isn't just reacting to sound, it's integrating sound with prior knowledge, computing probabilities, and triggering action only when confidence crosses a threshold. This is sophisticated cognition happening in a brain the size of a walnut, and it raises a question that goes beyond owls, beyond hunting, beyond even sensory perception. What does it mean to perceive? We think of perception as direct. You open your eyes and you see the world. But that's not what's happening. Your brain is constructing a model of the world from incomplete, ambiguous, noisy sensory data. It's guessing constantly, filling in gaps, making predictions, updating beliefs. The owl just makes this obvious. Because the owl's sensory data is so indirect, sound waves instead of photons, we can see the inference process more clearly. The prey rustles, the brain guesses location, the owl strikes, and most of the time, the guess is right. But it's still a guess, a very good guess, refined by millions of years of selection, tested every night in the field, but a guess nonetheless. And this tells us something fundamental. Perception is not passive reception, it's active interpretation. The world doesn't deliver itself to your brain prepackaged and labelled. Your brain has to build the world from world, raw data, using models, using predictions, using probabilities. The owl is not hearing where the mouse is. The owl is inferring where the mouse is from the pattern of sound reaching its ears, filtered through a lifetime of experience and deep evolutionary knowledge. And in total darkness, that inference is good enough. The talons close, the prey is caught, the model matches reality, until it doesn't, because the system can be fooled. In the laboratory, researchers have played tricks on hunting owls, testing the limits of acoustic perception. They've used speakers to generate fake rustling sounds, displaced in space from where a real mouse sits motionless. The owl strikes at the speaker, not at the mouse. It follows the sound, trusting the information its ears provide even when that information is a lie. This tells us something important. The owl's brain doesn't know where the prey is in some absolute sense. It knows where the sound came from. And if the sound is misleading, if it's an echo, a reflection, a deliberate fake, the brain will be misled. But in nature, sounds don't lie, not often enough to matter. A rustle in the leaves almost always means something small and alive. An echo almost always comes from a real source nearby. Over millions of years, the statistical regularities of the acoustic environment have been encoded into the owl's perceptual system. The brain makes assumptions, justified assumptions, and those assumptions work. Until humans enter the picture. Owls hunting near roads sometimes strike at sounds that confuse their targeting. Tire noise, engine hum, acoustic reflections off pavement. These are sounds the owl's brain wasn't built to interpret. The ancestral environment didn't have cars. The perceptual system has no model for this kind of acoustic clutter. And so, owls make mistakes. They strike at phantom targets. They misjudge distances near hard surfaces that reflect sound unpredictably. They sometimes hit the ground too hard, injure themselves, fail to catch prey they would have caught easily in a natural environment. This is the cost of specialization. The system is optimized for a specific set of conditions, natural soundscapes, predictable acoustic environments. Change those conditions and the system struggles, but the owl adapts, slowly. Individual owls hunting near human infrastructure learn over time to filter out certain sounds, to avoid striking in areas where the acoustic data is unreliable. The brain recalibrates, not as fast as it did during the critical period of youth, but enough to survive. And this adaptability hints at something we haven't fully explored yet. The owl's sensory system isn't just hardware. It's not a fixed machine executing a rigid program. It's a learning system, responsive to experience, capable of tuning itself to local conditions. Young owls, still developing their hunting skills, make frequent mistakes. They strike at sounds that turn out to be leaves blowing in wind. They misjudge distance, landing short or overshooting. They sometimes crash into branches they didn't map acoustically, but with each failed strike, the brain adjusts. The predictive model becomes more accurate. The threshold for triggering a strike becomes better calibrated. The owl learns what sounds are worth pursuing and what sounds are noise. This learning process has been studied extensively in barn owls by Knudsen and his colleagues over decades of research, with recent updates published through 2024. They've shown that the auditory spatial map in the brain is not hardwired at birth. It's constructed through experience, shaped by the statistics of the sensory input the owl receives during development. If a young owl grows up in an acoustically cluttered environment, its map will be tuned differently than an owl raised in a quiet forest. The brain adapts to the habitat. It learns the local acoustic landscape, and this tuning persists into adulthood, giving each owl a slightly customized version of the universal owl hunting system. This is phenotypic plasticity, the ability of the same genome to produce different outcomes depending on environmental input, and it's critical for a sensory system operating in diverse habitats across a global range. A barn owl hunting in a California grassland faces different acoustic challenges than a barn owl hunting in a European woodland. The frequency spectrum of prey sounds might be similar, but the background noise, the reflective surfaces, the density of vegetation, all of this varies. A rigid, inflexible system would fail in unfamiliar habitats. A plastic adaptive system thrives, and thriving for owls has meant spreading into nearly every terrestrial habitat on Earth. From the Arctic tundra, where snowy owls hunt lemmings in the continuous daylight of summer and continuous darkness of winter, to tropical rainforests where spectacled owls navigate dense canopy by sound alone, to deserts where burrowing owls hunt at dusk in open scrubland. Owls have found ways to make acoustic hunting work in conditions that would seem impossible. Each habitat presents unique challenges. In dense forest, sound attenuates quickly, absorbed by leaves and trunks. Owls hunting here, like the tawny owl and the barred owl, tend to have lower frequency hearing, better suited to sounds that penetrate vegetation. In open grasslands, sound travels farther but competes with wind noise. Owls here, like the barn owl, have facial discs optimized to focus on faint, high-frequency rustles. The diversity of solutions mirrors the diversity of habitats, but the core principle remains the same: listen, localize, strike. And this principle, refined over 60 million years, has made owls one of the most successful predator lineages on the planet. But success in evolution isn't measured by how well you hunt, it's measured by how many offspring you produce. And here, the owl's acoustic hunting system provides an advantage that goes beyond just catching prey. Because hunting at night means avoiding competition. During the day, the skies are crowded. Hawks, eagles, falcons, all of them hunting the same small mammals, competing for the same resources. An owl trying to hunt during the day would be outcompeted by visual specialists with faster reflexes and sharper eyesight. But at night, the competition vanishes. Most diurnal raptors roost. They can't hunt in darkness, their visual systems shut down. The night belongs to the owls, and the prey that emerges at night, nocturnal rodents, insects, small mammals that hide during the day, is abundant, untapped, a resource base that other predators can't access. By evolving acoustic hunting, owls didn't just learn a new trick, they unlocked an entire ecological niche. They became the apex predators of the night, filling a role that would otherwise be empty. And this niche partitioning is visible in ecosystems around the world. In forests where both hawks and owls live, they rarely compete directly. The hawk hunts by day, the owl hunts by night. They eat the same species of mice and voles, but they never encounter each other. The temporal separation is as effective as geographic separation. This is how biodiversity is built. Not through endless competition for the same resources, but through specialization, through finding new ways to make a living, through exploiting dimensions of the environment that others can't. The owl's dimension is darkness, and in darkness, sound becomes light. But there's one more layer to this story, one more question we haven't fully answered. If sound is such a powerful hunting tool, why didn't other predators evolve the same system? Why are owls unique among birds? Why didn't hawks develop silent flight and asymmetrical ears? Why didn't crows, intelligent and adaptable, make the leap to acoustic hunting? The answer is constraint. Evolution doesn't start from scratch. It modifies what's already there. And the modifications required to build an acoustic hunting system are extensive, interconnected, difficult to evolve incrementally. Silent flight requires specialized feathers, but those feathers are delicate, more prone to damage, less effective for fast flight. A hawk that developed silent wings would lose speed, lose maneuverability, lose the ability to chase prey in open air. For a visual hunter, that trade-off is fatal. Asymmetrical ears require changes to skull morphology, but those changes might interfere with jaw mechanics, brain structure, balance. For most birds, the cost exceeds the benefit. The facial disc requires sacrificing feathers from other functions, insulation, waterproofing, display, and it only pays off if you're hunting in conditions where sound is more reliable than vision. The owl lineage evolved these traits together, in concert, because they were hunting at dusk, in low light, where the benefits of each small improvement compounded. A slightly quieter wing let them hear slightly better. Better hearing let them hunt in slightly darker conditions. Darker conditions favoured even quieter wings. The feedback loop drove the system toward greater and greater acoustic specialisation. But for a lineage already committed to daylight visual hunting, there's no entry point. No way to start down that path without losing what already works. Evolution is path dependent. The owl found a path that worked. Other raptors found different paths. And once you're far enough down a path, switching becomes impossible. You're locked in. This is why evolutionary innovations are rare. Not because they're hard to imagine, but because they're hard to reach through incremental steps from where you are now. The owl's acoustic hunting system is a masterpiece, but it's also an accident, a contingent outcome of specific historical circumstances, specific selective pressures, specific starting conditions that happen to align in just the right way. If you rewound evolution and played it again, you might not get owls. You might get something else entirely, or nothing at all. But in this timeline, on this planet, the owl exists, and it hunts in darkness, and it does so with a grace and precision that still, after millions of years, looks like magic. So let's return to that field at midnight, the barn owl on the fence post, the vole hidden beneath snow. We started with a question: how does an animal hunt what it cannot see? And the answer, we've discovered, is that the owl rebuilt what seeing means. Vision, we tend to think, is the gold standard of perception. We're visual creatures. We trust our eyes. We assume that seeing is the most direct, most reliable way to know the world. But the owl challenges that assumption. Because what is vision, really? It's the detection of electromagnetic radiation in a narrow frequency band, reflected off surfaces, focused through a lens, converted into neural signals by photoreceptors. It's one way to sample information about the environment, a good way when there's light, but only one way. Sound is another. The detection of pressure waves in air generated by movement transmitted through space, captured by structures that convert mechanical vibrations into neural signals. It's indirect, it's slower than light, but it's information nonetheless, and in darkness it's better information. The owl doesn't experience this as a limitation. It doesn't perceive itself as hunting blind. In its world, sound is sight. The acoustic map in its brain is as vivid, as spatially precise, as the visual map in yours. When the owl hears a rustle, it doesn't think, there's a sound over there, so maybe there's a mouse. It perceives the mouse. Directly. Immediately. The way you perceive a cup on a table when light bounces off it into your eyes. This is what neuroscientists mean when they talk about sensory substitution. The brain doesn't care what form the information arrives in. Photons, pressure waves, chemical molecules. It cares about what the information represents. And if the information reliably indicates the location of an object in space, the brain builds a spatial representation. For the owl, sound is spatial. It has location, dimension, depth. The world the owl perceives at night is not a soundscape, not a field of noises to be interpreted. It's a space, populated by objects, just as real and present as the visual world you inhabit during the day. And this reveals something profound about perception in general. The The world you see isn't out there in some objective sense. It's a model your brain constructs from sensory data. The colours you see don't exist in the photons. The solidity you feel when you touch a table doesn't exist in the atoms. These are interpretations, representations, useful fictions your brain creates to help you navigate reality. The owl's acoustic world is no more or less real than your visual world. Both are models, both are constructions, both are good enough to keep the organism alive, and this matters because it suggests that intelligence, cognition, awareness, whatever we want to call the thing that makes an animal more than a machine, doesn't require any particular sensory modality. It doesn't require vision. It doesn't require a large brain. It requires information and a system capable of using that information to make adaptive decisions. The owl has roughly 1 million neurons in its brain. You have 86 billion. But the owl's million neurons are doing something remarkably similar to what your 86 billion are doing. Building a model of the world, updating it continuously based on sensory input, using that model to guide action. The scale is different, the complexity is different, but the principle is the same. And this brings us back to the question we asked at the beginning. If seeing was never really about light, if it was always about information, then what else have we misunderstood about perception, about intelligence, about the nature of being aware? Because the owl is not unique. It's just the most dramatic example of a broader truth. Animals perceive the world in ways we don't. They sense dimensions we can't access. They build models of reality that are as valid as ours, but utterly different. Bats perceive space through echoes, building sonar maps of the world that have no visual analogue. Pit vipers sense infrared radiation, detecting the heat signature of warm-blooded prey in total darkness. Sharks sense electrical fields generated by the muscle contractions of fish buried under sand. Migratory birds sense the Earth's magnetic field, navigating by a compass we can't perceive. Each of these is a different way of being in the world, a different window into reality, and the fact that we can't experience these modalities directly doesn't make them less real. The owl hunts by sound, not because it's compensating for poor vision, but because sound is, in its ecological context, the superior sense. It provides information vision can't. It works when vision fails, and over millions of years selection has refined the system to a level of performance that matches or exceeds visual hunting in its niche. This is not a backup system. It's a primary system. The owl is not a bird struggling to see in the dark. It's a bird that perceives darkness as rich, as full, as navigable as you perceive daylight. And this shift in perspective, from seeing the owl as impaired to seeing the owl as differently abled, is more than semantic. It changes how we understand the diversity of life. Evolution doesn't drive all organisms toward a single optimal solution. It drives them toward local optima, specialized solutions for specific niches, and each solution opens a window into reality that others don't have. We've spent centuries assuming that human perception is the baseline, the standard against which all other perception should be measured, but the owl suggests otherwise. Human perception is one option among many. Vision is one tool among many. And the richness of the natural world lies not in how closely other animals approximate our experience, but in how radically they differ from it. The owl perceives what we cannot, and in doing so, it reveals that the world is larger, stranger, more full of information than we ever imagined. So when you watch an owl hunt at night, you're not watching a bird handicapped by darkness. You're watching a bird that has transcended the limits we take for granted, a bird that hears space, a bird that perceives geometry and silence, a bird that knows, with sub-degree precision, the location of something it has never seen. And if the owl can do this, if a brain the size of a walnut can build a three-dimensional model of the world from sound alone, can compute ballistic trajectories in real time, can strike with lethal accuracy in conditions we would call blindness, then perhaps we need to reconsider what we think we know about perception, about intelligence, about the possibilities of being alive. Because the owl didn't invent a workaround. It didn't settle for second best. It discovered a truth we're only beginning to understand, that seeing was never about light. It was about information, and information exists in forms we haven't learned to read. The world is full of signals. Pressure waves and electromagnetic radiation and chemical gradients and electrical fields, each one carrying information about objects, about space, about change. And evolution has built receivers for all of them. Ears and eyes and noses and electroreceptors, each one tuned to a different channel, each one offering a different perspective on reality. The owl chose sound, and in doing so, it didn't lose sight. It gained a new way of seeing, which means the question isn't how the owl hunts in darkness. The question is, what else are we not seeing? What other channels are we blind to? What information is flowing through the world right now, all around us, waiting for the right receiver to decode it? The owl found its channel 60 million years ago. It's been listening ever since, and every night in forests and fields across the planet, it proves that darkness is not empty. Darkness is full. You just have to know how to listen. And in total darkness, the owl perceives more than we ever will in daylight.